I didn't fall for her the day she smiled at me. I fell for her the day she was tired, and didn't try to hide it. Some moments don't need words. The way she exhaled when I stepped closer said everything. I never expected to feel something so deep with someone who had already lived so much more life than me. But love doesn't check calendars. It just arrives. The night she stayed late with me, the whole office felt like it was holding its breath. Love didn't happen in the big moments. It happened in the silence between us. The office had gone quiet in that way it only does after everyone else has left. The overhead lights were dimmed, the computers slept, and the city outside the windows glowed in distant patches of gold. I'd stayed late to finish a set of reports, something I didn't really mind. I've always liked the calm that settles after most of the world finally pauses. But that evening felt different. Because she was still there too. If you like my story, then subscribe my channel. Her name was Elena, my boss. A woman who carried authority not by raising her voice, but by speaking softly and meaning every word. She was organized, composed, elegant in a way that seemed almost effortless. She had a presence that didn't demand attention, but simply drew it. I had always respected her. I didn't expect to feel anything beyond that. She sat across from me at the conference table, sleeves rolled up slightly, hair loosely pinned back in a way that suggested the day had been longer than she intended. Her glasses rested beside her laptop. Every few minutes she would pause and rub the bridge of her nose, a small, weary motion that said more than any complaint could. I noticed myself paying attention to things I hadn't before, the subtle shake in her wrist after hours of typing. The way her voice softened when she was tired. The delicate, almost invisible sadness in her eyes when she thought no one could see. She didn't ask me to stay. I didn't need to offer. We simply stayed. Side by side. Quiet, but not distant. There was something calming about working near her, as if we were sharing a silence that understood us both. Here, I said softly when I saw her reaching for a file just out of her reach. I leaned in at the same moment she did, and our fingers brushed lightly, barely a second of contact, but enough to freeze the moment between us. Her skin was warm. Soft. The kind of touch that didn't shout, but whispered. She paused. I did too. Her eyes met mine, not startled, not evasive, but searching. Curious. A flicker of something unspoken moved between us. Not romantic yet. Not dramatic. Just human. A shared recognition. She withdrew her hand slowly, but her expression had changed, softened at the edges, almost tender. And for just a breath, I felt something shift inside the room. Like the air had thickened, or the world had leaned a little closer to listen. We didn't speak of it. She simply gave me a small, gentle smile, the kind someone gives when they aren't sure how to explain what they're feeling. I returned it, equally unsure, equally aware. We finished our work. Packed our bags. Walked out into the cool hallway light and said goodnight like any other day. But we both knew something unspoken had started. Something quiet. Something delicate. Something neither of us was ready to name. In the days that followed, nothing dramatic changed. No confessions, no lingering touches, no spoken acknowledgement of the moment we shared. And yet, everything felt different. Not in a way that others could see, but in the way I noticed her, and perhaps, in the way she noticed me noticing. I found myself looking up from my desk sometimes and catching her in small, unguarded moments. Not the poised, composed professional everyone admired, but the woman beneath all of that. The one who exhaled softly before opening her email. The one whose shoulders eased only when she thought no one was paying attention. The one who seemed to carry the weight of her world alone, quietly, gracefully. Her presence lingered with me even outside of work. The memory of how her fingers had touched mine stayed in my mind like the echo of a soft chord. It wasn't desire, not yet, it was awareness. A warmth in the background of my thoughts. And she noticed me, too. Not in an overly attentive way. Not in anything bold or deliberate. But in small, precise acknowledgments, the way she would look up when I walked into the room. How she asked from my perspective more often, genuinely listening. The faint, almost unintentional smile when I passed her a document, or simply nodded across the hallway. We had begun to move in quiet synchronization. I started taking small tasks off her schedule, not because I wanted to impress her, but because I didn't like seeing stress settle in her shoulders. She didn't ask. I didn't announce it. I just did it. And she noticed, though the only sign was the way her voice softened when she thanked me. One afternoon, we stayed a bit later than everyone else again, though not nearly as late as before. She was sorting through a stack of papers, her hair pinned loosely again, one strand falling forward. Without thinking, I leaned slightly closer. "You should take a break," I said gently. She paused, not in defensiveness, but in surprise. Not at my words, but at the softness in them. "I'm fine," she replied, but not convincingly. "You don't have to be," I said. Quiet. Careful. Her eyes lifted to mine, thoughtful, searching, just like the night before. There was no touch this time. But her gaze held me, and for a moment, we were the only two people in that entire building. Later, when we packed up for the day and walked toward the elevator, she slowed her pace just slightly, enough that we walked side by side instead of one leading. Our steps matched, unhurried. At the elevator doors, she turned to me, not with her usual composed professionalism, but with something softer, something real. "Thank you," she said. I didn't need to ask what for. I simply nodded. Because gratitude is easily spoken. But what passed between us was something quieter, deeper, the beginning of being seen. "You said the third week brought rain, the kind that begins gently and then turns the whole evening into a quiet symphony of water against glass." The clouds came in early, and by the time the workday was ending, the building seemed wrapped in a cool gray hush. Most of the staff left quickly, eager to avoid the downpour. But the storm felt coming to me, and I stayed behind to finish a few things. She stayed too. Not because of obligation, I think, but because for once, the storm outside felt gentler than the one she had been holding inside. The sound of rain softened the office lighting, made everything feel closer, quieter. She stood by the window for a moment, watching the city blur into watercolor shapes. Her expression wasn't sad, exactly, just distant. The expression of someone remembering something they don't speak about anymore. When she noticed me looking, she smiled, just a little. "I used to love evenings like this," she said. Her voice was low, thoughtful. "I used to paint the sky when it rained." It surprised me, not because she seemed incapable of something creative, but because I realized how much of her life I hadn't seen yet. How much she had kept tucked away behind expectations and polished professionalism. There was a small lounge area near her office, a couch, a kettle, a stack of untouched magazines. She gestured toward it, and I followed. She made tea, moving slowly, as if the pace itself was a relief. We sat across from each other, the rain continuing its steady rhythm outside. For a moment neither of us spoke. But it wasn't uncomfortable. Silence with her never was. When she finally did speak, it wasn't about work. It wasn't about schedules or deadlines or reports. It was about life, or rather, the life she hadn't given herself the space to fully live. "I think somewhere along the way, I forgot I was allowed to feel tired," she said quietly. Her fingers brushed the warm surface of the teacup, her gaze lowered. The admission was small, but it carried the weight of years. I didn't interrupt. I didn't offer advice. I simply let her words exist, because sometimes the most respectful thing you can do is listen. "I always believed if I just kept going, everything would eventually feel lighter. But it never did." She looked up then, not at me, but through me, into something she had tried not to acknowledge. There is a kind of vulnerability that doesn't cry, doesn't tremble, it just rests, open, unguarded. She was there. And I knew instinctively that stepping too close would make it vanish. So I placed my hand on the table, near hers, not touching, but close enough that if she needed connection, she could choose it. She didn't take my hand. But she didn't move away either. Her eyes softened. Her shoulders eased. A breath she had carried for far too long finally released. The storm outside continued, but the one inside her began to quiet. The shift between us wasn't obvious to anyone else, and maybe not even fully to us at first. But it was there, in the way silence between us had become something shared, something warm. In the way her presence no longer felt like authority standing before me, but someone beside me. Someone human. Someone reachable. The week had been intense. Meetings, deadlines, expectations from upper management. I could see the pressure settling on her shoulders again, the quiet strain in her eyes. She stayed composed, she always did, but I was learning to read the subtle language of her exhaustion. That morning, she walked into the office slightly later than usual. Her hair was loosely tied, her steps slower, her smile faint but trying. I didn't say anything. Sometimes speaking too soon can break the fragile surface someone is holding together. Instead, I simply made sure her desk was already organized, her reports aligned, her schedule cleared of what I could manage. It wasn't much. But it was something. Around midday, after a tense call with a senior executive, she stepped out of her office with her arms crossed, posture tight. Her eyes met mine, not searching for help, not asking for anything, but simply trying to hold steady. I walked toward her slowly. "Do you want to step outside for a minute?" She didn't answer with words. She just nodded. We went to the building's rooftop, a quiet place few people remembered existed. The wind was cool, the sky still streaked with the remnants of the earlier rain. The city stretched out in muted colors below us. She stood near the railing, arms wrapped around herself, as if keeping everything inside by sheer will. I didn't stand in front of her. I didn't try to make her talk. I just stood close enough, near enough that if she wanted to lean, she could. For a moment, she didn't speak. The wind brushed her hair across her face. She exhaled, long and trembling, the kind of breath that comes when someone is too tired to pretend anymore. I took a single step closer. Not invading. Not assuming. Just being there. My hand moved to her upper back, slow, gentle, deliberate enough to allow her every chance to move away. She didn't. Her body softened, only slightly at first. Then more. Her shoulders released. Her arms loosened. Her head dipped forward, just enough that her forehead nearly touched my shoulder. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was real. She didn't collapse into me. She didn't break down. She simply allowed herself to rest. And that was more intimate than any embrace could have been. I felt her breath slow. I felt her quiet steady again. My hand stayed on her back, warm, steady, present. And in that moment, we both understood something without needing to say it. Closeness doesn't always begin with confession or courage. Sometimes, it begins with simply allowing yourself to not be alone. After the rooftop, something gentle settled between us, not spoken, not defined, but undeniably present. We didn't change the way we worked. We didn't suddenly grow bold or obvious. If anything, we became quieter. But quiet does not mean empty. Quiet can hold 1,000 unspoken things. We began to share moments that lasted just long enough to be felt, but not long enough to be questioned. When I reached for a stack of documents across the table, her hand would already be moving toward them too. Our fingers didn't touch as often now, not because the moment didn't matter, but because we were both careful with what was forming. Careful not to rush it. Careful not to ruin it with something loud. Yet the awareness was always there. Sometimes, working beside her, our chairs would shift just close enough that our knees brushed, a light, accidental contact. Each time, I felt a warm pulse of something neither of us was naming. I would move back slightly, and she would too, but the space between us never returned to what it once was. She started to unburden herself in tiny fragments, not in dramatic confessions, but in quiet, almost passing admissions. I used to love long walks at night. I used to paint before all of this. I think I forgot how to relax somewhere along the way. The words used to repeat it often. Her life, I realized, had not been empty, just paused. A long pause she had convinced herself was necessary to be respected, to be strong, to be self-sufficient. She didn't talk about love or loneliness directly, but the absence of those topics spoke loudly. One evening, after most of the office had cleared, she came to my desk with 2 cups of tea. That was new. She had always been the one receiving gestures, not giving them. She placed the cup near my hand gently, as if acknowledging everything I'd done without ever needing to say it. We sat beside each other, not with an agenda, not working, just being. The room felt small, warm, familiar. The kind of atmosphere that makes you breathe deeper without realizing it. She rested her hands on her lap, fingers loosely intertwined, posture not tense for the first time in weeks. Her voice was quiet, almost fragile when she spoke. "I haven't let myself be close to someone in a very long time," she admitted. Not looking at me, but at her hands, as if the words were delicate enough to break if she held them wrong. It felt easier to keep everything at a distance than risk, something I wasn't sure I could handle again. I didn't try to fill the silence. I let her finish her sentence, even though it came out incomplete. Her eyes lifted to mine, searching, open, a little afraid. I didn't give her promises. I didn't move closer. I didn't try to define what we were. I simply said quietly, "I know." Because I did. I understood. And sometimes understanding is more intimate than touch. She exhaled, soft, relieved, grateful. In that moment, we weren't boss and assistant. We weren't an age gap. We weren't something complicated. We were 2 people who finally allowed themselves to be seen. There are days that unravel slowly, thread by thread, until a person can no longer pretend they're okay. This was one of those days for her. I saw it in the way she entered the office, how she carried her bag a little too carefully, how her voice stayed soft even when she needed to be firm. She was holding herself together, but only just. The pressure came in waves, emails, phone calls, unexpected deadlines, decisions that demanded emotional weight. I watched her navigate all of it with her usual composure, but underneath it, I could feel the effort it took. Stillness has a sound when you know someone well enough. As the office emptied, the lights grew dim, and the quiet settled in. She remained at her desk long after everyone else had gone, staring at the same document without actually seeing it. I didn't ask if she needed help. I simply stayed, a presence just near enough to be steadying. Eventually, she looked up at me, not with invitation, and not with refusal. Just a silent acknowledgement that she didn't want to be alone in that moment. We worked side by side, the only sounds the tapping of keys and the faint hum of the building at night. The world outside the windows blurred into hollow darkness. She exhaled, long, slow, the kind of breath that comes from someone nearing their limit. "Are you all right?" I asked quietly. Her eyes didn't rise to meet mine. "I don't know." No attempt to be strong. No forced smile. Just honesty, the kind that only comes when someone no longer has the energy to hide. I stood from my chair and stepped closer, not quickly, not urgently, but with the same gentleness I'd learned from her silence. She didn't pull back. She didn't tense. She simply stayed still, like someone waiting for the world to finally pause. A strand of hair had fallen loose, brushing against her cheek. Slowly, giving her time to stop me if she needed to, I lifted my hand and tucked it behind her ear. My fingertips grazed her skin, warm and soft. I could feel her breath catch, not in fear, but in recognition. Her eyes closed. For the first time, there was no careful distance, no unspoken step between us. She leaned forward, just enough that her forehead came to rest against my chest. Not collapsing. Not needing to be held up. Just resting. My arm moved around her back, steady and slow, holding her like something precious and breakable. The warmth of her body pressed lightly against mine, her breathing uneven at first, then gradually finding the rhythm of calm. No one spoke. And because silence had always been our language, it felt perfect. She let herself be held. And I held her, not as someone rescuing her, and not as someone taking from her, but as someone willing to stand steady beside her, without asking her to be strong. In that quiet, close, fragile moment, our understanding deepened into something neither of us needed to name. Something real. Something earned. Something neither of us would forget after that night. Everything between us felt clearer, not in a way that required definitions or declarations, but in the quiet ease of being near each other. The world outside still expected her to be composed, decisive, always in control. But with me, she didn't need to perform anymore. And I didn't need to chase or push. We simply existed together in a way that made sense, without hurry, without fear. Nothing about our work dynamic changed on the surface. She still led with grace and steadiness. I still supported with quiet dedication. But there was a new understanding in the space between our everyday movements, a softness we didn't need to hide, because it wasn't something loud or reckless. It was gentle, natural, earned. We began to share small pieces of life beyond the walls of the office. Lunches turned into walks to the café down the road. Walks turned into conversations about music, memories, childhood, the subtle ways we became who we are. Conversations turned into sitting together in comfortable silence, watching evening light fade over the city. Sometimes she would talk about the years she spent trying to be everything for everyone, the reliable one, the responsible one, the one who never let anything fall apart. Other times, she would simply rest her hand near mine, and that was enough to say she trusted me. I think trust was the real beginning of us. There was no moment of dramatic confession, no breathless declaration in the rain. Instead, there were choices, small, steady ones, that grew into something shared. Like the evening we walked home together after work. The sky was soft with the last colors of sunset, the streetlights just beginning to glow. She paused at the corner where our paths would separate, turning toward me with a quiet smile. It wasn't hesitant. It wasn't uncertain. It was warm. Her hand found mine, not quickly, not with urgency, but with the calm certainty of someone who knows exactly what she's reaching for. Her fingers intertwined with mine slowly, giving me every chance to step back. I didn't. We stood there for a moment, just holding hands in the soft light of early evening. No need to define anything. No need to justify or defend the closeness. It was simply something that had grown over time, nurtured by presence, patience, and understanding. We didn't rush. We didn't hide. We didn't pretend it was something less than it was. And we didn't pretend it needed to be something more before it was ready. Sometimes, love doesn't ask to be announced. It simply asks to be felt. And as we walked forward together, side by side, steps matched, hands warm in each other's, I realized something. We had not fallen suddenly. We had grown into each other, slowly, quietly, beautifully. And that was enough.